Southwest Florida, the last frontier of the American cowboy. With wide open range and almost unlimited grazing, this is where anybody with a small penny could turn into a cattle baron. Cubans paid up to $15 a head in gold doubloons that made them really wealthy. All right, enough of the cattle and enough lassoing. Yeehaw! Let's go birding.
Now is the time of your life. Oh, now is the time. It's a sweet ride to the end of the line. Now is the time. It's the right time to come alive. Now is the time of your life. Oh, now is the time of your life.
Smoking ponies. Did you see that bird?
This is the perfect habitat for this bird.
Yeah. That's what I call birding. Awesome. That's our golden bird.
The west coast of Florida is probably best known for its excellent fishing and beautiful beaches, but it also offers some wonderful birding opportunities. Just a few miles from the tarpon fishing capital of the world, Boca Grande, lies a little treasure of a wildlife area called Babcock-Webb. And this is the location of our search for this week's golden bird, the red-cockaded woodpecker. But this particular area on the west coast of Florida is not only known for the red-cockaded woodpecker, but also some other interesting species. And before we went off to look for the red-cockaded woodpecker, we spent some time looking for an unlikely inhabitant of the residential areas of Punta Gorda.
This is a residential area, but it's also home to one of the cutest little owls. This is called the burrowing owl, and they live on big open areas of land, and that's really led to their downfall over the last few years, especially in Florida, is that open lots like this are at a premium for residents. But right here in the middle of this residential neighborhood, we've got one of the most spectacular little owls out there. This is the burrowing owl, and it's closely related to the Athene genus of owls. Because they're such small owls, they have a lot of natural predators. Foxes, hawks, other owls. Look at him right now. He's looking straight up at that hawk flying above us. They'll sit outside their burrows, watching out for predators all the time. The burrowing owl is found all across South America, right up into North America and Mexico. And in some areas, it has actually increased because of deforestation. That means opening up open areas which are suitable for its habitat. But in others, open areas have been built on, like in Florida, and that's led to its downfall over here. These owls are crepuscular. They're most active at dawn and dusk, and they feed on vertebrate animals like rodents, amphibians, and reptiles, but also a lot on insects. And their favorite insects are actually crickets and termites, which they'll feed on at many times of the year. They also are one of the only owls that eat fruit. Believe it or not, yes, fruit. These owls will feed on the fruit of cacti, where cacti grow in the right areas, and also they love the fruit of the prickly pear. And this diversity of food sources has enabled the burrowing owl to survive through the millennium. They're quite long-legged, they spend a lot of time on the ground, and as their name suggests, they burrow into the ground, and that's where they spend their lives, in those nests or in those burrows. Look at the amazing color of their eyes. That bright, bright yellow. It's almost freakishly haunting, the color of these eyes. It's really important for us going forward to realize how we share the habitat right on our doorsteps with some amazing and incredible wildlife. Get out there, leave your homes, and open your eyes to the splendors of the natural world. This is my good buddy Rob Arrington. He doubles up as the host of Real Adventures, a great fishing show on television. But he loves hunting, and we're in one of the best hunting areas in Southwest Florida, the Babcock-Webb Wildlife Management Area. I'd have to pat him down to see that he doesn't have any ammunition on him, because we need him focused on the birds and not on that boar that walks across the road or that white-tailed deer. Where are your guns? Where's your ammunition? Oh, what's this here?
Pocket knife, man.
Oh, man. I think he's got some guns in him somewhere. He's got a bow, knives. You got knives? Oh, no. No, he's clean. We can go birding. Let's do it.
Babcock-Webb is one of the best examples of pine flatwoods in Southwest Florida and is prime habitat for red-cockaded woodpeckers. But this habitat also attracts a host of other birds. We were very lucky to go out with NFL legend John Hall, who's more renowned for kicking a piece of pigskin further than anybody else in the NFL. John's always had an interest in the outdoors, but he's never actually been birding before. And it was a great pleasure taking him out birding for the first time, and we saw some wonderful birds at Babcock-Webb. Interspersed amongst these forested areas are areas of prairie and various waterways and lakes. And we couldn't resist looking for some of Florida's specialities. There'd been a report of some purple gallinules in the area, and we took John out to go and see if we could find a few of these beautiful, beautiful birds. John is living proof that you don't need to be a nerd to enjoy a bird. This is a typical Florida birding scene where you've got 4 different species in one field of view. Here we've got a white ibis, a moorhen, a little blue heron, and a great egret, all together in one view. Any body of water in Florida is a potential home for alligators, and right here we've got a massive alligator, American alligator, probably about 11, 12 feet long, superb specimen basking in the morning sun. This is a glossy ibis. You can see it's got that beautiful glossy sheen on its feathers. It's preening itself right now. Look at those feathers, beautiful color. The blue-winged teal gets its name from that blue speculum on the wings. Look at the male right now, he's opening his wing to show that blue speculum perfectly. Oh, what a pretty color. The king of all the Florida water birds in terms of beauty has to be the purple gallinule. It's got this metallic blue sheen on its feathers, and this is actually not caused by pigment, but rather the way that the feathers are placed and the way that they are situated. That reflects the light or refracts the light and gives it that beautiful blue sheen. You can see their bright yellow legs as well, that blue shield on top of the bill, and that brightly colored bill as well. They are very, very pretty birds. You can see those long toes enable him to walk over the thick vegetation to grab onto any piece of the tree or the bush that he's in. They like these thick areas of papyrus, pickerel weed, where they can make their way from waterway to waterway. And what purple gallinules will actually do, they've been seen to push over pieces of the vegetation to make bridges between areas of vegetation and the water. They don't particularly like crossing open water. They like always to stay in thick cover. You can see those long toes. He's grasping the vegetation, feeding on pretty much anything he can find in the water. They'll feed on the bases of certain reeds and papyrus. They also like to feed on little mollusks, little insects as well.
So John, what's been the highlight of your NFL career, would you say?
You know, I think it's more of an overall perspective I have on it. The relationships you build,
Right.
the great coaches I played for, and the great teammates I had, all the camaraderie, competition. So it was overall for me, there wasn't really one highlight I can pinpoint, but overall it was just, you know, it was a blessing to be able to play in the NFL for 10 years.
Right. How many NFL players do you know that are bird watchers?
One now.
Right, one now, I love
Yeah.
it. So what's it like? I mean, you've grown up in Port Charlotte and Charlotte County, you've lived here all your life. Did you know there was such great birding on your doorstep?
You know, I didn't. I've hunted the outdoors here down in South Florida and Charlotte County for a lot of my life. you know, a lot of the birds I'm learning about today, I've heard them in the woods,
Right.
but now I'm kind of associating what they are, and
Right.
it's pretty neat. So I'm
That's
having
cool.
a lot of fun.
That's cool. And the Great Florida Birding Trail is a wonderful way to get acquainted with the wildlife and the birds on your doorstep. We've got the Babcock-Webb Wildlife Management Area here in Port Charlotte. What a great place to visit and part of the Great Florida Birding Trail.
One of the most efficient ways to look for red-cockaded woodpeckers is to walk the pine flatwoods in search of mixed flocks of birds. And these mixed flocks are often called by some people bird parties, and they generally consist of pine warblers, palm warblers, various woodpecker species like northern flickers and red-bellied woodpeckers, eastern bluebirds, and also a tiny inhabitant of these pine flatwoods called the brown-headed nuthatch. These little birds actually co-inhabit the pine flatwood habitat with red-cockaded woodpeckers, and they've suffered a similar fate to the red-cockaded woodpecker over the years because pine flatwoods have been so extensively logged and cut down this century. The first time I visited Babcock, about a year ago now, I had absolutely no idea where the roosting trees of the birds were. Coming back a year later, we were very privileged to go out with Florida Fish and Wildlife researcher Wendy Wilsdon, who had the inside scoop on exactly where these birds were roosting every night and where the clusters were to be found.
We can see that the trees are marked with white paint around us. I'm here this morning with Wendy from the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, and she's doing incredible work on these birds. Wendy, can you tell us a little bit more about why the trees are marked with this white paint?
Yes, because the birds establish a nest cavity and they'll maintain it for years.
Right.
And so we band the tree so that we can continue to monitor it annually. We'll flag it with flagging if it's active, or we just maintain all cavity trees. The older cavities, other species will move into, but the ones that are active, that they're actively using, you can identify those by all the sap. They're very sappy, which protects them from predators, especially snakes that can climb the trees and steal eggs. So basically the banding is to help us locate the trees annually.
We're focused right on the nesting hole right now. I've got basically a full frame shot of this red-cockaded woodpecker, which is our golden bird, peeking its head out of the nest hole, waiting for the dawn. This is incredible. What an amazing little woodpecker. He seems to be peeking his head out, looking, evaluating his surroundings, making sure there's no danger before he leaves the security of his nesting hole. Now these woodpeckers are unique amongst the woodpeckers because they nest in live pine trees, and it can take them 1 to 3 years to excavate a burrow in a live pine. And for that reason, it's very important that we protect and preserve these pine flatwoods. There's only about 3% of the pine flatwoods in North America remaining today. And for that reason, there's only about 1% of the initial population of red-cockaded woodpeckers left on Earth. This is incredible. There he is, top of the pine tree. He's peeking around with the morning light on him. What he's doing is he's hitching himself up and down this pine tree. They've got what's called zygodactyl feet, 2 toes facing forwards and 2 toes facing backwards, that enable them to hitch themselves up and down the tree. And what they're doing when they're going up and down that tree is they're peeling the bark, lifting the bark, looking at the bark, looking under the bark for grubs and insects that they can eat. Woodpeckers have a specially adapted tongue, which has some barbs on it, so they shoot that tongue into the grub or the insect, and it attaches almost like a fishhook, and they pull that grub into their mouth and swallow it. Very specialized birds. We often get asked the question, why don't woodpeckers get headaches? And this is another special adaptation that this bird has for its lifestyle. It's got a relatively small space between the brain and the skull cavity, and the skull itself is almost cushioned, so that there's minimal concussion when the bird taps against the tree. They've also got these mandibular muscles down the neck, which contract each time that the bird knocks into the wood, thereby absorbing the shock into the whole body of the bird rather than just the brain itself. We're letting Robert, our cameraman, go up ahead. We've got really powerful lenses that enable us to keep our distance from these important birds. It's very important that when people come in and view red-cockaded woodpeckers, that they respect the nesting habits of these birds. Don't try and get too close. Keep your distance and view them perfectly with binoculars. That's the way to look at them. This is the nesting cavity of a female red-cockaded woodpecker. And what's incredible about this bird is that it'll return faithfully to this nesting site every evening to sleep. Right now, it is winter in South Florida. We're in December, but come March, April, the male, whose tree is just about 50 yards away from us over here, will join up with the female and they'll mate. And the female will choose a nesting hole, either her nesting hole or the male's nesting hole, and she'll lay 1 to 3 eggs inside the nesting cavity. The male's actually a good father because he'll return in the evenings and incubate the eggs and also keep the nestlings warm. These woodpeckers are very unique for their breeding habits. They're what's called cooperative breeders, and the young nestlings from the previous season will often help to raise the young of the dominant pair. And in northern Florida, it's often the sons of the previous brood that'll help. But here at Babcock-Webb, researchers like Wendy have found that the females stay behind as well to help with the rearing of the young and the building of the nest cavities. What an amazing bird, and what a privilege to see red-cockaded woodpeckers in South Florida. I've seen them several times over the course of the last year, but every time I go looking for them, I get really excited. This is a special bird, and this is a bird that anybody can see in South Florida. Just remember, keep your distance, respect these birds. They're very faithful, very territorial, and if they are driven off from their nesting sites, they may not return. Look after them. This is our heritage. Let's go birding.
In the late afternoon, we returned to another cluster, which is the term for a group of red-cockaded woodpeckers, and spent several hours viewing the habits of a particular male and female up close. Wendy also shared with us the history of this particular pair of birds.
In the middle of September, we brought one of our fledgling females from another part of the property, and we literally did a translocation at night. We captured her in her tree cavity out there, brought her in, put her in this artificial cavity that we have built in the tree, and screened it off. The next morning, we released her, and she is within 50 yards of a male red-cockaded's tree. So in the morning, the two of them interacted, and we do this in order to try and boost up potential breeding groups. Single male sites, he'll stay here his entire life. So we want to bring females so that that we can boost the population and kind of assist. That's why we use the artificial cavities to be able to create a home much quicker than the birds can excavate themselves.
It is vital for the conservation of this bird going forward that birders, especially when they're looking at this bird, keep a respectful distance. It is incredibly labor intensive, both for the male and the female, to develop their nesting boxes and their nesting sites. It takes 1 to 3 years for them to excavate their nesting cavities. That is a lot of work for a bird that sometimes only lives up to 9, 10 years in the wild. So very important that we don't disturb them, we keep a respectful distance, and that red-cockaded woodpeckers can maintain their territories for years to come.
Babcock-Webb is a truly wonderful place and deserves its listing in the Great Florida Birding Trail. Places like these will ensure that the red-cockaded woodpecker doesn't end up like its larger cousin, the ivory bill.
Station floor, heading back to a place you've never been.